Hello, a very warm welcome to all the participants and speakers that are joining us today for the virtual roundtable on the topic Solutions for Reducing Value Chain Emissions. I'm Marianne Kropf, Project Manager at CSR Europe, focusing on supply chain emissions, emission management, and their reduction. And as CSR Europe is hosting this roundtable, I have the honor to moderate this session today and to guide you throughout this roundtable. This roundtable is organized, as you surely know, as part of the European SDG Summit. And as you know as well, the roundtable is organized, or the European SDG Summit is organized under the headline for climate action and a just transition, and quite in line with this topic, this roundtable will focus on specifically the first topic, so climate action, and how companies have been undertaking and are currently undertaking climate action. So this roundtable will focus on this and specifically highlight companies' best practices. Thanks to the Summit Roundtable, we also have access to its good functionality, so you can use the chat functions to pose questions throughout this session. So this session will, as mentioned, look at climate action that companies have been undertaken. In the beginning, we will set the context and look at value chain emissions in more general. As you surely know, value chains are large, broad, and very complex. And if we add one thing on top of that, it's the managing the emissions of value chains, then we just have one added layer of complexity. And basically we will add, in the beginning, we will put the context of this topic. Then we will have a presentation, two presentations that will give some best practice examples and solutions on supply chain management engagement for emission reduction. This will then be complemented by a view here, that will focus on, that will slightly shift the perspective, and here focusing on how a company, here an energy company, can collaborate with customers to reduce emissions. And finally, we will have a panel discussion with all the speakers that are here around the table. This panel discussion will be moderated by me, and there we will also have the time to raise any questions that here the participants have raised in the chat or in the question function. And finally, this will be closed by CSR Europe. Again, here to highlight how to make full use of the session for the participants. When you are on the platform, you can join the live discussion by posting questions in the chat. And there's two possibilities. So either you join in the chat or you pose questions directly to the participants. And I recommend you using this if you want to raise questions, because your questions can be upvoted and I can make sure that these are then raised with the speakers. Good. So without further ado, I would like to move to the first speaker and introduce to you one of the key actors, that you're surely, most of you already know. When it comes to emission reporting, emission management, there's one key actor that supports companies, and that is the Carbon Disclosure Project. For already 20 years, CDP has been supporting investors, states, regions, cities, and companies in emission management, and particularly the reporting of companies' environmental impact. So from my perspective, there's nobody better to introduce you to the topic of value chain emissions, and also to introduce you to specifically Scope 3 emissions, how the current status quo is, how is companies' business maturity on this topic, etc. And so I'm very happy to introduce you to our first speaker, Kate Reddington, who is Associate Director at CDP Europe. Her presentation will then be complemented by a presentation of one of CDP's members, John Crowell, Manager for Sustainability and Corporate Affairs at Magna International, who will then present his perspective and the reasoning for using one of CDP's tools. But so first off, I give the word over to Kate Reddington. Welcome.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you very much for having us to set the scene for the discussion today. And so I will start off with a little about the background of CDP and how we work. So the next slide shows how we work. We all know at the moment that part of the key to achieving the Paris Agreement and keeping global emissions warming to below 1.5 degrees will be only possible with engagement of our global supply chains. I think next slide, please. CDP works to transform the way that the global economy does business. We do this through engaging with investors, companies, cities, states, and regions, as Marianne mentioned. And one of the major levers traditionally has been through the investor voice. So those over 590 investors that represent about 95 trillion euros in assets has been traditionally a very strong lever to request environmental data from companies around the world. The second lever was introduced about just over 10 years ago with the supply chain program. And now we have over 200 supply chain members that also request information and cascade that request further down throughout the value chain. We hold the largest global database of self-reported information on climate change, water impact, and deforestation. And the next slide shows you what we ask companies and what we ask suppliers. We know that driving action starts with collecting data. And we've been hearing from speakers throughout this summit so far that what gets measured gets managed, and that's been one of the central tenets of CDP since our inception and remains one of our core approaches. And essentially the CDP supply chain program is enabling companies to use that same platform and framework to request information from their own suppliers in a consistent way, in the way in which they themselves are reporting to their multiple stakeholders. Each of the questionnaires also has a supply chain, a supplier specific module that reflects that supplier customer relationship. So for example, suppliers can also allocate emissions to their customers and propose collaborative opportunities to reduce emissions together. And that's some of the things I'm really excited to hear about later on. This discussion is more around the collaborative effort. It's certainly a key part of supplier engagement. Another part of it is also we've heard of how SMEs will also be covered under the new CSR directive, and with companies being at different levels of maturity and at different stages in their journey towards environmental sustainability, we've seen that purchasers extending this ask to their suppliers and so on through the value chain has also been a way to shine light further and quicker. So we think that's been really, really effective over time. Even in 2019, we had over 2,000 SMEs that had been requested by their customers to respond to CDP. The next slide illustrates some of the more than 200 purchasing organizations that are engaging their suppliers through CDP. And they have an incredible amount of power. They have about 4.8 trillion euros in procurement spend. So this is a second lever of power, we say, to engage with companies, and it's a very large driver. These 200 organizations requested over 17,000 suppliers to disclose their environmental data this year. And really, it's also about moving all of the companies together, including SMEs or including large organizations that have been doing this for a long time, are very used to the ask, especially from investors, for example. But it's about taking everybody with us and moving from a place of low awareness and therefore high risk to a place of high environmental management and potential collaborative opportunities as a way forward. And it's definitely not an overnight process. It takes time to build these relationships, to put these projects in place and to really reap the benefits going forward. And the next slide just shows you a little bit more about how this process has evolved over time. We have seen a growing movement. This chart here illustrates the growth in disclosure. So as I mentioned, over 17,000 suppliers were requested, many of them for the first time, and we had over 8,000 disclosures. The interesting thing about this also is the output, the impact, and suppliers in 2020 in aggregate disclosed that they undertook activities to reduce GHG emissions by 619 million metric tons. And that is significant. And we have also seen that this makes business sense to them. They also achieved a savings of $33.7 billion. So the business case is clear. It's been clear for a number of years now. And this is also something that we try and drive again down the value chain to definitely accentuate the benefits rather than just the perceived additional work in terms of reporting, etc. It's used as a framework to ask the right questions of your own business to move forward. In the next slide, this is really kind of moving on to Scope 3 emissions. So awareness has really arrived now on the importance of Scope 3 emissions. And recent analysis from CDP has shown that supply chain emissions are 11.4 times higher than operational emissions, which is more than double our own previous estimates. And for as long as we've been making these estimates, it has been increasing. So as our awareness and our understanding of Scope 3 accounting and methodologies has grown, so too have the emissions that we've been able to turn out. So we know that understanding the Scope 3 is extremely important to an organization to really address their own carbon impact. We found that there are three main levers to increase environmental performance along the supply chain. Number one is really simply the ask. So asking your suppliers to disclose so that they begin to measure and they begin then to manage. So disclosure process is a vital first step in that. The second part is introducing environmental metrics into procurement processes. So we know that elevating environmental metrics into these procurement processes makes them central to the business conversation and are a very effective way to engage with your suppliers. And the third and very important lever is also setting public targets to articulate your ambitions. And this firmly establishes the link between your suppliers and your own goals and the role that they must play to help you to reduce your Scope 3 emissions. And this top-down model really does bring about environmental excellence. Which brings us on then to disclosure works on the next slide. Interestingly, when we talk about how there are new companies over time that this is still coming up for, this means it's also ripe for opportunity to continue to reduce emissions and to find more ways to bring about emissions reductions initiatives and to set targets. So we know that for companies that in their first year of disclosure might have, where 38% of them might have emissions reductions initiatives, by their third year, 69% do. And likewise with targets, in their first year, where 50% of the companies might have set targets, in their third year, 2/3 will have, and so on, and increases over time. And with science-based targets on the next slide, really, this is just to sum up that a lot of our members have, as very large purchasing organizations, they have set their SBTs. Their SBTs will include their suppliers, and a supplier engagement part of their target is extremely important. And they use the CDP supply chain program to collect data and to engage with their suppliers on this process, to use the CDP framework as a way to bring their suppliers with them. And then also the next step further to strategize and to collaborate with them. And essentially, that's really what I wanted to finish up on, is the importance of these targets, the importance of the supply chain for you to achieve your own targets. And I'm delighted to pass over to John, who's one of our own supply chain members at Magna International, who will talk a little bit more about how their approach is and how it's evolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for your insights. And without further ado, I would hand over the word to John from Magna International.
Great, thank you very much. Good to be with you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in the discussion. just want to give you a brief introduction in terms of who we are as an organization and how we fit into this conversation. So as Kate alluded, we participate in the CDP program, but the next slide will give you a snapshot in terms of who we are within the industry. So we are Magna International. We're the 4th largest parts supplier in the automotive industry. We have over 160 or close to 160,000 employees. We are in 347 manufacturing sites, but we're located in 27 different countries. And what's not listed on this slide is we work with over 50 customers within the industry, and we have over 10,000 suppliers that we work with in terms of delivering our services and products. And we also have 7 different operating groups within Magna under our umbrella. And one of our unique offerings within the industry is the ability to provide solutions in every facet of the vehicle and provide the complete vehicle manufacturing. What also isn't listed in this slide is from our awareness and reporting through CDP and our awareness in terms of our own emissions. In terms of 2019, we emitted more than 2 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. And so we certainly have our work cut out for us in terms of progressing forward. The next slide gives you a brief boilerplate overview in terms of how we prioritize aspects of sustainability more broadly than emissions, thinking about our products, our process, and our people. And the next slide gets into some of the bullet points and some of the tangible actions that we've undertaken in the past year, which is a continuation of our sustainability journey in terms of how we're working with our supply chain members. So most importantly, in terms of getting our own house in order this year, we made a commitment to reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030 to 0. So bringing that value of 2 million emissions from 2019 to 0 by 2030. And also part of that is obviously working and setting science-based targets related to that. And what's complementary in terms of establishing science-based targets and beyond our carbon neutral commitment is actually addressing those scope 3 emissions. And when we think about our upstream and downstream emissions in the various categories, we know overwhelmingly that the majority of those emissions are attributed to our supply chain members in terms of our purchased goods and materials. So beyond, again, our own carbon neutral goals, how are we going to work to reduce those emissions within our supply chain and work with our value chain members? The next slide gets into the practical steps we've taken in terms of our supply chain engagement, not directly related to CO2 emissions, but more broadly, we've expanded our use of the SAQ questionnaire that's through the NQC platform and really managed and driven by CSR Europe and Drive Sustainability. We consider it to be the industry standard questionnaire in terms of addressing and creating transparency around human rights, health and safety, and conflict minerals. There is also a linkage in the SAQ to the CDP scoring and program, which is a nice link. And then most tangibly, we've also participated this year for the first time in the CDP supply chain program. So really trying to encourage our suppliers to increase the level of transparency, increase their awareness of their own emissions. We as an organization have been disclosing through CDP climate and water since 2011. So there was almost an inevitability that we would be at this position in time to start engaging our suppliers to get involved, help us understand our place in the industry, but also their place and how they can contribute to the industry-wide goals in terms of carbon reduction efforts. And, just in addition to some of those efforts related to supply chain, improving our scope 3 emission awareness. Beyond that, we as an organization, we're also getting into the business of conducting life cycle assessments on our products. And this is all interrelated in terms of how do our emissions and our total footprint fit together, and how can we address them not only as an organization, but partners within the industry, with our customers and our suppliers. So that's my introduction for today's discussion, and looking forward to addressing questions and discussing with the panel members. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation and these insights. I, of course, have some direct questions, but I think we have enough time in the panel discussion, and we will follow up on your motivation and maybe some difficulties later in the panel discussion. But before I do raise those questions, I would now like to stick to this perspective. And connecting to this topic, I'm very happy to introduce to you the next speaker, who is Mrs. Stella Di Carlo, Head of Innovability, Global Procurement at Enel, and she will give us another example, Enel's example of supply chain decarbonization, specifically by showcasing us how Enel is engaging with suppliers to address supply chain emissions, to increase supply maturity, and to leverage their climate action. So with this, I hand over the word to Stella.
Thank you, Marianne, and good afternoon, everybody. And we can go through the first slide. Yes. Then I would like to start explaining the global procurement role over the three types of GHG emission. At Enel group level, we are able to measure the scope 1 emission that are the direct impacts generated by our own asset and plants. We know what we produce in terms of our power plant emission and networks emission as well. When we reduce the thermal production, automatically we reduce the scope 1 emission. As Enel, we have the scope 2 emission that regards the impacts from energy, steam, and heat produced from third parties. In our case, is the energy we supply to our buildings or to some plants different from the ones that we own. It regards mainly the technical network losses. Then there is the third portion of emission that regard the scope 3, that are the indirect impact generated by their customers and supply chain. Much of the impacts occur in the raw material extraction phase. All the emission produced for supply chain for all the goods, services, and works that are both in order to perform a specific business are within the scope 3 upstream emission. We could estimate the impact, but our strategy is to measure them with primary data. It means that coming from suppliers, to set targets in order to start a reduction pattern. We can go to the next slide, please. The estimation of CO2 emission in the main industrial and commercial sector shows that the scope 3 impact is the biggest one. But what about the energy sector? By now, we don't know because it doesn't exist a benchmark for that. The energy company has started right now to understand how to measure this impact. What we know for sure is that as our scope 1 is reduced as fossil plants are phased out, scope 3 emission is becoming increasingly important. So I would like to explain you briefly what is our approach. First of all, engage supplier engagement. And for doing that, we have 3 stages. The first one, engage a new supplier starting from qualification. The second one is during the tender phase, we can use requirement and incentive key factor in order to foster the sustainability. And then we have also the vendor rating after the tender, after the contract. In addition to additional key performance indicator, we need to evaluate our supply also for their performance of sustainability and circular economy. All this evaluation will trigger a consequence management activity that is aimed at guarantee the growth of our supplier toward our pillar that are quality, safety, punctuality, and now also sustainability and circular economy. Then we have to set up metrics and targets. We established the APD, that is the Environmental Product Declaration process, in order to create a new standard that is not existing before to measure the impact of 13 specific categories that are the main supply for the Enel group. The APD considers the life cycle assessment of a product. The aim is to establish a target level, to ask our supplier to stay below the level, and to valorize the suppliers that are well below this target. Then we would engage them to establish a commitment of reduction in order to communicate to all the stakeholders that we are able to commit a reduction pattern. Then we have the valorization. We know that suppliers need to undergo certain cost and investment in order to achieve metrics and targets of reduction. Then we want to know which is the degree of investment that they need to understand if the value we generate is higher or not to the cost in order to create value for all the stakeholders. Then the first one and the last one is the ecosystem. We are starting this work to establish alliances, to have a lot of utilities and companies sharing the same view that we have, so that the effort our supply undergo are shared with our customers. The ecosystem can improve a lot the speed towards sustainability and also leverage toward institution governance in order to establish reference role and targets that are valid for all. We can go ahead, please. Here, the relevance of circular economy for net zero. This graph shows trends over the last century in raw material extraction and carbon emission. Under a current policy scenario, we will likely reach 80 billion tons of CO2 emission by 2050. With the adoption of the Paris Climate Agreement, this will go down to 56 billions, and improvement of the circular strategy will bring this down further to reach net zero by 2050. At our current annual rate of emission, it will take us just a little over a decade to blaze through the remaining budget. Highlighting this would like to highlight the urgencies of an initial curtailing of emission. Studies predict a circular economy contribution to decarbonization up to 45% of targets. That's why opportunity of co-design, co-innovation with suppliers shall be explored in tenders to pursue circular purchasing models. A variety of factors have prevented companies from trying to reduce emission in their supply chain. One common problem is that many companies still have limited transparency about this emission in the first place. At many companies, emissions are distributed widely across countries and suppliers, including suppliers and suppliers of suppliers. What is the objective we have to mind to better ensure the sustainability of the supply chain? Addressing Scope 3 emission is fundamental for companies to realize credible climate change commitments. It enables companies to use their influence in supply chain to speed and support rapid decarbonization throughout the economy. And it can put pressure on suppliers in regions where governments do not yet do so. We can go ahead, please. To achieve this goal, we have defined a circular procurement strategy through a process by which purchase works, goods and services that aims at minimizing and or avoiding negative environmental impact and waste creation during their life cycle. Strategy has three main pillars. The first one is the supplier engagement. We need to engage them through the key factor and requirement in tender. The engagement of supplier is discussed with them. Supplier that accepts to be compliant with key factors takes a premium if they are active in these issues. Second pillar is measuring impact. We have defined international recognized metrics on the main products we buy that can be APD or isocarbon footprint. We are able to compare the most virtuous products. So while we can choose and reward the best supplier, we can also entice the most negative supplier to improve their production process because it is proven to be feasible. The last part of the strategy is the co-innovation, the hardest part, but the one that gives the most benefits and the one that goes into product design. Solutions are studied that involve the use of recycled and recyclable materials, facilitate product maintainability, packaging, and transport. In this phase, it is possible to use all the technology available in Enel, from innovation by vendor to design to value to startup initiatives. So the last slide would like to show you the importance to demonstrate how the achievement of APD certification by our suppliers is recognized as a strategic and marketing value to be sponsored and promoted to their customers. The use of websites, social media, and news show how the culture of measurement is becoming an increasingly important tool for creating value. Sustainability is value, and the ability to measure and certify impact is recognized as a value for the company and the entire supply chain. So thank you very much for your attention, and we are looking for your question.
Thank you very much, Stella, for this very insightful presentation and for all the details on the activities that you are doing, and especially highlighting the collaboration with suppliers. Now, we are slightly shifting the perspective. Of course, now we were looking at the perspective how companies can work with their suppliers. But of course, if we shift the perspective, a company can also be a customer. And here in the next presentation, I would like, we will present to you an example of how companies, in this case, an energy company, TotalEnergies, can work closer with their customers and to support their customers to reduce value chain emissions. I'm very happy to introduce to you the next speakers, which are from TotalEnergies, Timur Nunes-Janowski and Jean-Yves Laroffi, representing L'Oréal. And basically, they will give an example, a very specific case of where, as mentioned, TotalEnergies transformed their business model and offered now decarbonized solutions and allowed with these decarbonized solutions to empower the end customers to reduce their own carbon footprint. And so without further ado, because of course the speakers can give a better presentation of their project, I will hand over the word to Timur, who will give you an introduction to this best practice example.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Good afternoon to all, and thanks for granting us the opportunity to be here. And we'll be very happy together with Jean-Yves to answer the questions in the panel. If we move to the next slide, I will give a quick overview of TotalEnergies' climate ambition. So in 2020, we took a major step forward in our response to the climate challenge by setting a new climate ambition, which is getting to net zero by 2050 for our global business across our production and energy products used by our customers together with society. At the end of May, many of you or not may have noticed that Total has transformed and became TotalEnergies, anchoring its strategic transformation into a broad energy company in its identity. So the first part of our climate ambition for 2050 concerns our Scope 1 and Scope 2 to become carbon neutral in our own greenhouse gas emissions from our own production facilities. We do have control of our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions related to our operations, which means we can actually take the necessary steps to reduce them. However, our Scope 3 emissions related to the use of our products by our customers, in contrast, will depend on many other factors, and on consumption choices by our customers in particular. So this takes me to the second part of our climate ambition that concerns Scope 3. It requires that we jointly achieve neutrality with our customers by working very closely with them to reduce their direct emissions, so their Scope 1, which correspond to our indirect emissions, our Scope 3. Let me add here another message. Total Energies is the first major to announce that emissions related to the products will decline in absolute value by 2030, thanks to changes in its energy sales portfolio. And to go a bit further, in 2050, our portfolio of activities in renewables and electricity should account for up to 40% of our sales. So if we move to the next slide, for those who don't know Total Energies, our company is a broad energy company active in more than 130 countries, producing oil and biofuel, natural gas and green gases, renewables and electricity, with the ambition to become net zero in 2050. So as part of this ambition, we are building a portfolio of activities in renewables and electricity with more than 10 gigawatts of gross renewable capacity worldwide at the end of this year, 2021, that will reach 35 gigawatts in 2025 and 100 by 2030. The objective is to become one of the world's top 5 players in renewable energies. If we move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So it's a fact that we don't have control over our clients' emissions. However, we can actually contribute to our customer choices by providing them lower carbon energy products and support them in the energy transition towards carbon neutrality. So we have solutions in all high growth segments of renewables, being that large scale solar, on-site solar, bottom fixed and floating offshore wind, energy storage, and EV charge. I'll be now more specifically talking about on-site solar solution and how we can support our B2B customers in the energy transition, how we can empower them to reduce their own emissions in their operations, and how we can share with them our recognized expertise in developing on-site solar solutions. So at Total Energies, we have the resources and the skills to support our B2B customers. Why is that? First of all, we have a strong expertise and involvement across the entire integrated electricity chain, from investment to development, construction, and production. We also have experienced teams across the globe. Third thing that is important, we have an extensive track record of successful deployments of Total Energy sites across the globe. This is actually an important fact that I'm going to outline with 2 examples. The first one being our own solarization program. We solarize our own sites and service stations. So thanks to our long-standing regional presence in 130 countries, this program enables the best locally adapted solution viable over the long term for our clients. In other terms, we apply the rhetoric first to us, and then we make our clients benefit from the return of experience we granted in these different countries. The second one is that we are decarbonizing our own assets. We are investing massively in renewable electricity. So the objective is to supply our industrial sites in Europe. And as a matter of fact, we are set to cover with renewable electricity all power needs of our industrial sites in Europe by 2025 with our Spanish solar sites through the largest corporate PPA in the world, which is 3.3 gigawatts for 7 terawatt hours of energy need. Going back to why we are supporting our customers and why we can do so. So we have tailor-made solutions for any type of on-site needs and objectives through rooftop, carports, ground-mounted installations. We are agile, flexible. We work on a tight schedule, which we're going to see later on. And our company's DNA, which is security, our first value, provides us with a very strong operational experience acknowledged by our customers and partners. The fact is that we have over 500 INC customers across the world, and around 200 solarized B2E sites in operation or under construction. The solution for an on-site solar plant is an on-site PPA, which is a long-term contract with electricity produced directly on the customer site and sold at a predictable price. So as you may understand, our financial robustness allows us to support this renewable development as others. This said, what could be better than a case study with one of our clients? Jean-Yves, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Timur. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jean-Yves Laroufi. I'm the General Manager for Active Cosmetics Productions, meaning the factory of Vichy and the factory of La Roche-Posay. And before we start giving some details and having a chat about this project, what could be better than a small video, a small film about our project, Total Energies and L'Oréal. So please have a look at this film.
Nous sommes à Vichy, dans une usine spécialisée dans le soin de la peau qui compte 500 salariés. Nous avons solarisé ce site par conviction. Nous pouvons contribuer positivement au développement durable et que dans une usine qui utilise de l'eau thermale, un ingrédient naturel, nous pouvons installer des panneaux solaires et ainsi bénéficier d'une énergie locale et renouvelable. C'est un projet d'utilisation d'une surface qui était un parking en une surface utile à l'environnement. Nous avons décidé avec Total Quadrant de poser des ombrières au-dessus de nos véhicules. Nous réalisons des économies grâce à ce projet. Au total, plusieurs dizaines de milliers d'euros sur la globalité du projet.
En matière de solarisation, on sait faire beaucoup de choses. Dimensionner l'installation pour de l'injection sur le réseau, pour de l'autoconsommation. On va savoir faire les choix de bonnes technologies.
Total Quadrant s'est imposé comme une évidence. C'est un partenaire fort, fiable, avec une vraie relation de confiance qui s'est construite au fil des jours.
Vis-à-vis du client, ce qui est important, c'est de l'écouter, c'est de comprendre son projet et d'avoir aussi les moyens de lui apporter les solutions qu'il attend, ce que nous avons au sein de Total Quadrant et plus globalement au sein du groupe Total.
Il y aura une suite, parce qu'un tiers de notre électricité, c'est déjà beaucoup, mais c'est pas assez pour un site qui a de l'ambition, qui veut aller de l'avant, et nous travaillons d'ores et déjà à de nouveaux projets très innovants avec Total Quadrant.
So good. So I hope you enjoyed the film. Maybe there was quite something with the sound, but whatsoever, you see the pictures of these solar panels above our car park, and you see the different message we had with the GM of Total Energies. So really, as a short introduction, we do believe that Total was the right partner to support us in our energy transition. It is a long path, and the CDP knows that for L'Oréal. And Total Energies has met all L'Oréal needs, speaking about economic impact, Timur said that, technology and design standards, because we had very high design standard. So basically, we are extremely satisfied of what happened. And maybe Timur can give you a few tips about how a design to cost solution and a tailor-made solution was conceived for us. So Timur, back on game.
Thank you, Jean-Yves. Thank you, Jean-Yves, for introduction, and sorry for the technical issue. So just a very quick note, the logo you were seeing was a video made in March before the reveal of our new identity of Total Energies, so don't mind it. Actually, Total Quadrant was the previous name of our business unit in charge of renewables in France for Total Energies. So going back to the business case about the Vichy site, it's probably L'Oréal's flagship facility, that ambition to source renewable energy and local resilience. The solution that you didn't hear, but maybe read, is that we have delivered a turnkey customized renewable solution on schedule to one of the industry top players and showcased our common sustainability ambition. So it was a 1.6 carport delivered on site with almost 4,000 modules on 10,000 square meters. And if I have to outline here, two elements would be some challenges we faced. The first one would be the site's constraints. The site is located between a biological area, an airport, and a national route, adding additional technical constraints and complexity, and implying a multidisciplinary approach to deliver this type of project. The second element would be the client schedule. What Jean-Yves did not outline is that it was made and prepared for the 50th birthday of this site, of this flagship site. So adding also the official development stage of a solar PV project, adding the procedures to obtain the subsidies from the CRE, the Commission de Régulation de l'Énergie, the entity granting and managing the tenders for the subsidies, with also L'Oréal's tight schedule, was extremely challenging, but also very motivating to deliver this project. So in terms of benefits for L'Oréal, I believe Jean-Yves is better suited than I am to talk about it.
Yes, Timur, we made it. Actually, it was a birthday gift for this factory, who is now 52 years old, and it was really first a tailor-made solution. And speaking about benefits, the tailor-made was first TotalEnergies brought us some different carport project, and we had to choose respecting the legal, respecting the highest HSE standard. So the customer had the choice, and it was very important for us, for L'Oréal. Then Timur spoke about agility, about adaptability, about respecting a tight schedule, and I think they had to convince internally within the company that their support was more than necessary, and we had to convince public authorities, civil aviation, technical providers to be on time, because you only have 50 years old one time in a life. So it was on time. It was a reliable situation, and it's for a sunny day today in Vichy. It's a perfect solution, and we've increased this reliability. We have now 1/3 of our electricity provided with these solar panels. So it's good. It's good for nature. It's good for the pride of my colleagues. So it's a good solution. It's good for economics too. Speaking about asset value, it was a car park. It was a place where nothing was thought of. And these solar panels are the good solution at the right moment, and we can commit on 20 years and 25 years of a long-term solution. So it was really an economic and environmental project. So a 360 degrees project, as I call them. We spare more than thousands of euros, 10,000 of euros every year, speaking about economics, and we improve our environmental footprint with a win-win, I dare say, project. We are reducing our carbon emission. Of course, we were a neutral carbon site, but thanks to this, we have above all a local production site, and it's a good thing. And we did it with paying attention to the biodiversity, paying attention to the birds, to the bats. You may have seen on the film some nests, so that it is not a desert, it is not a place where only solar panels, but really a place where nature in its whole is taken into account. And last but not least, I dare say it's a concrete commitment to energy transition. Sometimes you need, when you run a factory like me, to send some positive signals. Of course, you can recycle water, what I do. I can encourage biodiversity, what I do. I can spare some energy, what I do. But having, from the very first time you come to a factory, this major installation is a milestone. It's a milestone that says to my customers, to say to my visitors and to my colleagues, we are making it together. We are climbing the stairs of a better, sustainable production. And that's why my last word, well, thanks TotalEnergies for this trust, for this commitment together, and thanks to all the person of the project involved, because it was a 18-month project with this tight schedule, and we made it. And the CEO of L'Oréal inaugurated it on time, and now it's good for 25 years of solar. So I think it's a milestone. Maybe Timur, if you want to add something, but it's a story of partnership, it's a story of trust, and it's a story of will.
I think you were very complete, Jean-Yves, so I'm not going to digress anymore. Thank you very much. And I think we'll be leaving some time for the participants to ask some questions. In any case, thanks for the opportunity to present this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I already see some some questions specifically on this project. I will share it with the speakers. First of all, I wanted to apologize also to the participants for the technical problems. I just received note from our platform provider that in the recording, the correct version of the video will be brought in. So that means that anybody who will watch the recording later will be able to see the video with sound. Good. So with this, yes, I just wanted to let the people know that have put questions in the chat. I have noted these. One question related a little bit just to make a connection to how we ended here in this presentation. One participant has indeed asked how partnership can allow the transition towards emission reduction, etc. And this is, of course, one example, as you just ended your presentation, of how important partnership and collaboration is between two parties, and also that trust is one key ingredient to achieve this. Good, but now before we go in depth of how collaboration could be further leverage climate action, I would like to summarize the key points from the participants and thereby open the panel discussion. Good. So basically, to summarize all the comments from CDP, Magna International, Enel, and Total Energies and L'Oreal. So, I mean, generally, we are well aware, and through recurring reports, we get the news that Scope 3 emissions make up a large part of emissions. We have heard from CDP that Scope 3 emissions are 11.4 times higher than Scope 1 and 2 emissions. If we summarize this correctly, then that, of course, the process of emission accounting is now, I mean, that's a very good trend. When we hear that Magna International has already since 2011 provided emission data, and thereby it felt like a natural process to request emission data from the suppliers themselves. So that is a good note. But on the other point, it looks like while we are now getting aware of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions will become increasingly important. And this is not tricky. I think this was also raised in the comment session that every partner in the supply chain needs to be connected. And I think then we're reaching the tricky part. So good. So this was just a quick summary of all the presentations made. Maybe I would like to open this panel with asking you again to highlight maybe if you had to summarize what your major motive was to pursue the activity. Did you have any other activities that you could choose from? Why did you choose to pursue this project or to present exactly this activity today? And I would like to start to open the floor and particularly ask our company's representatives to maybe quickly outline the major motive. Yes, so I leave the floor to any who would like to speak up first. Magna International, Enel, Total Energies, or L'Oreal. Just as a brief summary of your presentation for the participants.
Certainly, happy to start. So in terms of a major motivation, you know, I've been involved with Magna's sustainability initiative and program at the corporate level since 2015. I would say in the past 2 years or 18 months, we've seen tremendous progress and acceleration within the automotive industry from our customers, which I think is representative of the global movement, right, in terms of acknowledging issues related to climate change and how we need to address it. So if we assess our major stakeholders, our customers, our investors, and our employees, there is just tremendous motivation for us as an organization to set credible targets. And in doing so, aligning with CDP, aligning with science-based target setting, Paris Climate Accord, in order to do so, needed to engage with industry standard practices. As a tier 1 supplier, we're not looking to reinvent the wheel, create our own solution. We're trying to find the most accessible, transparent opportunities to drive at some of these solutions and partnerships with our customers and suppliers. So CDP obviously being that platform. Given our experience, again, I mentioned the inevitability of it, but that was really the push from our key stakeholders, movement within our organization, and setting credible targets.
Thank you very much.
I can give you a short insight about motivation. Motivation first is that nature cannot wait, and the planet cannot wait. And as industrials, we have to do our part and to play the part we can and to be responsible for that. So first, nature. Then we have to pay attention to consumer will, because the consumers don't want anymore to have some one-use plastic thing, and they ask us to go deeper, and we have to hear to this consumer voice, because in the end they are the one that makes our company exist. And in the end, I dare say, as an employer, as somebody who's hiring, and for my colleagues, there is something to do also. And I see with the project I showed you, the pride and the will for being associated to the environmental concern, and from a factory which is down the countryside, is very important, is key issue. So basically, the earth cannot wait. Our consumers expect us to, and my colleagues want me to. So in the end, everybody is aligned to go further and deeper.
If you add me, Marianne, to add a comment on what Jean-Yves just explained, L'Oréal launched an ambition plan to reduce its emissions among its value chain, and actually it matched also our ambition. It was extremely motivating to work with a client that is really on top of the edge regarding this type of actions, and to be able to align itself with them. So this was the major motive why we wanted to expose this concrete project that has been delivered. So developing a 1.6 on-site solar PV plant through PPA, meeting L'Oréal needs in terms of economical impact, technology, and design, because we made different designs, one for the parking of the L'Oréal employees, one for the clients, adapted to the site. And working on an occupied production site implied technical and operational excellence. So repeating what Jean-Yves said before, this business case demonstrated economics, long-term electricity at affordable price, sustainability, CSR commitment from the client, as well as the service provider in that case, reliability, 25 years guarantee, and asset value, as the Vichy site, among other projects they have developed, is now really not only a flagship factory for their own products, but also for showcasing how to implement specific actions on their value chain.
Thank you.
For our point of view, our main reason is that we would like to outline a reduction pattern. Then we need to have a clear picture of emission of supply chain. The only way to have a clear picture of the emission of the supply chain is to have certified data coming from suppliers. That's why we start this project, this job with suppliers, because it's really important to have on board all of them, to have the primary data, first of all, and then to set up a reduction pattern with them.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this is, I think all of these comments complement, I mean, the general trends and what I've also heard in other forums from companies. Now let us move to the second question, and that relates to a little bit a tricky question, but of course for our participants it's the most interesting one, namely, what type of challenges did you encounter when you thought to realize this solution? What were your lessons learned that you would tell today the participants, if they are, I'm sure that the participants joining us today are in different steps on this journey. And so please let us know if you could do anything differently, what would that be? And so if possible, you could elaborate this quickly in 2 or 3 points. And I would, again, as before, give you here the round so that each of the companies can quickly outline lessons learned, challenges, maybe challenges that are not solved yet. So these could also represent challenges that other companies face in general. And then we can, in the next question, follow up on these. So again, I would give the floor to the round. We can start with anyone who would like to start, or we start again with Magna International to respond to this. That's you.
No, I don't mind starting. In terms of in challenges, so we're only beginning and initiating our true supply chain engagement on these topics. And so we're only learning some of these initial challenges. As we can all appreciate, I think the first hurdles are the internal ones, right? In terms of having the internal coordination and motivation. So having succeeded with those, what we're learning already through the CDP supply chain program, and as I alluded in my first response in terms of providing an industry standard solution, is the value of the CDP supply chain program is there was already a number of our key suppliers that were disclosing through CDP. So that information was available if we chose to participate in the program. But we've learned from our initial survey that close to a majority of our top suppliers are not yet disclosing through CDP supply chain, which means they're likely not, or there's a reasonable chance that they aren't taking full account of their own emissions, aren't necessarily reporting or setting targets against those. So we know there's significant challenges for our industry in terms of heavy lifting, supporting our supply chain members in terms of gaining that awareness, gaining that accountability and reporting and actions related to their emissions. So I think within our industry, the challenges are immense, and we've been able to signal some of that, already that those learned challenges with our customers and working both with our customers and our supply chain to close those gaps.
Thank you.
Well, as a customer, maybe the first milestone is to know what you want. And of course, you have to be open to discussion, but if you don't, I said a few minutes earlier, it's a question of will, it's a question of definition of what you expect, and to confront it with your business partner and trust total to know if it's possible and when and why and how much for. So that's the first guideline I would say take time to define your project. Then the good thing would be to have an overview of what's happening in the world. You can benchmark. You can benchmark, of course, technical issues, but you can benchmark too regulation and subsidies. And because it's regulatory and subsidy, there are many evolutions in a short period of time. So you have to be very aware of governmental and regional regulation to be sure that you're not doing something that is dated back to past and that is more future-oriented. And then I think you have to explain it to plenty of people, because otherwise the project remains only brick and mortar, and so you have to be pedagogical and to explain the vision end to end of a sun cell and bring to life something that is a concept and bring it to life. So basically, pay attention to what you want, be aware of evolution of regulation, and be a good teacher about what you want to do.
I'm going to jump in order to complete what Jean-Yves just said, which is a kind of also almost a recommendation for the players in a similar solution. Kate and John here mentioned that it takes time to plan such actions. and to implement these projects. John mentioned that you can face internal hurdles. So it is actually essential that Jean-Yves said to be able here to know what you want and to understand the internal dynamic of your own company. I am not going to mention the many projects we have tried and we are still developing, but the time it takes to convince the different stakeholders within a company, external, it's quite a big job. And Jean-Yves mentioned that we delivered the project in 18 months. That was actually quite a success. And the criteria was that they knew what they wanted. We were the experts, so we were aligned. We knew, and we were bringing the value of the expertise in that specific area, so we could actually advance forward. So the main takeaways would be for other companies to understand your own need and ability to implement such a project within your company, know your concerns, your priorities, and the governance, because you need to, as Jean-Yves said, convince internally, explain internally to the corporate climate maybe group, to the lawyers, to the financials, to the energy buyers, all the in and outs of a project. And the second would be, well, you need experts to support and to be supported this type of projects with strong track record and to understand the site specificities. I'm talking here about on-site solar and meet the client expectations and minimize the impact on their own operations, which we were actually able to provide. And it's fair that a client actually benchmarks this with different options in the market that he may have. So the main takeaway is know what you want and plan it in advance.
For Enel point of view, the main challenge is again to engage suppliers, because we depend of data coming from suppliers for our certification data. So it's really important to explain them the importance to foster the sustainability through the supply chain. So the role, the central role that they have in all this process. And then another big challenge is the managing of data. A lot of suppliers means lots of data. So this is another challenge that we are dealing with. But of course, I agree with Total Energy that the most important thing is to plan all this activity, to plan in advance the supplier engagement, the data collection, the target setting, the involvement of all the stakeholders.
Thank you very much. So I see different points, and also that I would also like to pick up here. Well, first of all, that although it seems like there is a trend that goes towards supply chain emission management, many suppliers are still not disclosing or not part of, let us say, large-scale projects such as CDP. And so a challenge is how to reach those and how to engage those, collect the data. Then the second point that I found very interesting, and that I also picked up in the presentation from before, Jean-Yves, was to make the projects graspable. So now we are here in a roundtable with experts on the topic that can maybe understand better what exactly we're going to do with that data. But so solar panels seem quite concrete, like a project that you can more easily sell to your employees. Potentially also here a comment was raised to improve awareness of final customers and investors. Solar panels are quite concrete, but when you talk about supply chain emission data, it's maybe a little bit more tricky. So I understand that this was one key challenge, and also a point that we need to make sure that we get right, the education of employees, etc. And of course, the planning in advance. So now adding to this, I would like to move over to the next question. and that resolves around the topic of solutions. So of course we're here today, this roundtable has a topic of solutions, and so I would like to ask you what you would recommend, if you have any recommendations for companies that would like to implement similar solutions, and if yes, what would you recommend them, how to get started, etc. And here again I would like to open the round, but maybe we can start this time with Enel and then just change with Swift a little bit the sequence. Yes.
Okay, recommendation. In our approach, we have followed the Pareto analysis. It means that, first of all, it's important to understand which are the main supplies for the company, to focalize the attention on the supplies and to explore or the possibility to have data. In our case, we have asked the APD. It means that we are not just looking at the CO2 emission, but we would like to explore all the other environmental aspect that could be waste, materials, and use of water, and all these environmental aspects. So first of all is again to plan in advance what we have to explore in details, and then to follow the Pareto analysis and to go through the 1000%. But the beginning and the focus should be the main supplies of the company.
Good. Now maybe one of the other company representatives, if anyone would like to.
For sure. So in terms of solutions, and full disclosure here, my intent and goal today is not to act as a sales representative for CDP and the CDP supply chain program, although unwittingly maybe I found myself in this position, but obviously I'm here to share my experience. And so I would say for organizations that are potentially looking to understand their scope 3 emissions, to increase the engagement with their supply chain, I would say our experience with the CDP supply chain in the past year has been relatively turnkey. The resources and support from CDP have been apparent throughout the process, and the pain for our organization has been relatively limited, thanks to sort of the resources available. So I would say that it has been a solution for us that we will continue with going forward, and we'll look to probably expand our engagement as well.
Good. Any other recommendations you would like to add to the other companies?
I think, well, not to repeat ourselves, the message we wanted to transmit before is that from the client's perspective, it's essential to map the road towards, let's say, neutrality, and then to define the needs that could be defined. So from our perspective, without being the person able to explain, let's say, all the wide possibility of solutions we offer worldwide, that was, let's say, going from on-site, off-site, floating and offshore wind, EV charge and mobility solutions. We can always say provide the best need to our clients, but it's a very, let's say, tricky and challenging way to be able to partner with the clients in order to map this very difficult road towards neutrality that requires, let's say, first of all, trust. So this trust we built actually together with Jean-Yves across a specific site, enabled us to understand the world of the company, and then being able to provide larger solutions from our perspective. So this is the way how we can actually work on better and better to be always at the edge, providing lower carbon solutions for our clients.
Yes, and not to mention something that you need to be consistent. I think this word is important, because you can have some projects, and the one I presented, but if it's not a policy of a company, it's just a project and it has nonsense. So that's why L'Oréal has a strong partnership with CDP, because you need to have a 360 view about forest, about water, about energy, about CO2. And of course, we are speaking about decarbonation, but you have to be consistent, you have to build the trust, and you have to act on every single of these items to carry on being a leader on this. And you cannot just only satisfy with one project, but you have to be like what we call impressionist in France, you know, these painters. With small dots, you make a beautiful picture, and this picture is our commitment to sustainability.
And if I could also build on what Jean-Yves, what you've just said there, it's really about the action, and from kind of our experience of working with companies over time, and you know, even Enel speaking as well about the importance of collecting the data and using that data, and then working these data into projects that you can build upon, celebrating those wins. And one of the most important things, one of my favorite, most simple things that you can do is provide feedback to your suppliers, create a dialogue and have the discussion, lay out your expectations for what you're trying to achieve and why, and bring them with you. And from my perspective, those are quite often the simplest and easiest solutions to just that kind of supplier engagement part, which is incredibly complex and incredibly difficult. We could probably go on about that for another long time, but I was trying to keep it succinct.
Good. Thank you very much for adding on this. And now I would like to raise some of the questions that were mentioned in the Q&A. I will try to summarize most of them, and the most that connect to this topic. Please, I apologize in advance if we're not able to address all of the questions. Maybe we can start on a more general level, and namely asking the question here. One question was raised, particularly connected to the topic of value chain emissions and how value chain partners connect. So now, of course, we're here with partners that are usually directly connected here. How, and here this question I think was addressed to CDP, how does connecting value chain partners through CDP work? If I understand correctly, in your partner, CDP connects currently supply chain partners through the CDP supply chain program, right? And if I also understand correctly, we are now going down to tier 2 to connect these partners.
Yep, that's exactly right. And CDP is that one of the fundamental pillars of CDP is transparency. So we encourage companies to disclose transparently on their emissions, their water impact and deforestation. So the idea being that in sharing that's really forwarding their goals towards environmental sustainability. As John mentioned, when he was saying that he's been disclosing since 2011 himself, and that it was inevitable that he would then, after cleaning up shop a little bit at home, then turn his attention to his own value chain. And I think that's also the kind of the step that we see. You see it happening, and it's kind of this relatively predictable roadmap, and a lot of it is also around in setting these targets. The collaborative option is also a huge part of it as well. While we call it kind of the power of the ask, and without having all of these too many asks, but rather pooling voices together. So we have a lot of companies, for example, that particularly in one industry or even kind of larger companies will receive multiple requests from multiple supply chain members, but they'll just have to provide the data once. And the idea is really to cut down on the burden of providing data to multiple stakeholders, but also to do it in the same way. And then the third part of that is also to cascade it down into further tiers of the supply chain. So we've also seen kind of some of the first members of the CDP supply chain program were big, large consumer-facing companies or retailers, for example. In John's example as well, you see kind of some of the automotive industry, the large players as supply chain members. They were requesting their tier 1 suppliers, like John, Magna International, and then now they're requesting their suppliers and on down. And we've seen this replicated across a number of different industries. And also kind of around this concept has also been a number of working groups that have also kind of evolved out of this, so that certain industries can also be a little bit more aligned on the KPIs or that they're asking for in particular, or they can be aligned on their focus, for example, on setting up SBTs as a prerequisite for an industry. And that's something that's really, really exciting. So we really do believe in the power of collaborative action and transparency, and those two things really driving the action, and they're key.
Thank you. Following up on this question, I would like also to ask all of the participants to respond to the next question. So in principle, I think we all kind of agreed that there's a trend also towards supply chain emission reporting, action for decarbonization. But while it seemed maybe sometimes it seems a little bit one-sided in the terms that it can appear that way if an organization asks its suppliers requests to provide data input. So I want to ask if you perceive that this is maybe becoming more a complete picture where your supply chain actors also feel that they are equal partners around the table, that anyways, inevitably, they will have to report emissions and also seek the collaboration and also to trickle, for example, solutions down the supply chain. I want to hear from you, maybe if you have seen a little bit, maybe a trend, a difference, evolvement of the atmosphere. I hope you understand what I'm getting at here. The comment raised was that the different actors along the supply chain, if they recognize that everybody has a share of responsibility, and it's not me and your footprint, but it's our common footprint. And I just want to hear from you a little bit your opinion on and experiences.
And give a small tip on that. As well, always as an example, actually we have a duty of exemplarity. We are a locomotive, and we need to ensure that we are showcasing a way and to share it with our direct suppliers. So that's a double duty: exemplarity and sharing of best practices, and at the time encouragement for our extended company, meaning our supply chain, downstream or upstream, first in transportation in between our different sites, and then on their own sites. I recently got a delegation from my packaging suppliers, and they come to see us just to smell some innovation and to benefit from them. And I gave them the mail of Timur so that they could also arrange on their behavior, on their behalf, a project for decarbonation. So exemplarity, locomotive, and best practice sharing, and I think we hit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, for NL too, what Marianne told is totally true. Right now with the APD program, we are strong collaborate with our main suppliers. With them, we are going to, first of all, the first step was the certification, but then we are creating with them innovation project, co-innovation project, and also circularity project for specific supplies. So yes, they are totally involved in our process of decarbonization of our supply chain, but it's a long path. Right now we have the main supplies, but step by step we should include also the smallest one.
If I may add another comment to what you said, Marianne, repeating a bit what I said before, but also repeating again the message here, everybody I think is transmitting is it's key about the best practices. And in that sense, what we from Total Energies tried to do before was to apply the rhetoric to ourselves in order to be and to have a certain legitimacy to provide a specific solution. So if we go to the Solarization program, besides announcing a specific amount of solarization of industrial sites of the group and service plans. Concretely, what does this mean? It means that we actually used our internal clients to understand first the needs we have and try to see what was happening. So it was a very, very long process that was stepped and that was implemented almost 4 years ago. So after we gained all this different mapping of providers, technical experts on PV, for instance, we were able to certify them to be able to see which are the ones that are committed to a specific objective, which are the ones that are willing to but not yet ready, and we could actually help by homologating them to move forward. And after this mapping of stakeholders was realized, we are able to provide this specific solution to our clients. And this is actually the value here that we're trying to propose, specifically on B2B on-site solar solutions. But I think this entire learning process was key of sharing with all the stakeholders to move towards a similar goal, which we are talking about here, which is carbon neutrality in concrete actions.
Thank you very much. Looking at the time, we are almost about to wrap up, but there was one question which could be quick, at least. Let's see, I will try to bring it up here. We're talking, of course, we have here showcased examples which were B2B cases specifically, but of course, value chains are long and transparency is very important, which was highlighted by all of the speakers. And so here, one question that was raised that I would like to bring to the participants maybe and to see how you have considered this is, how can AI, machine learning, or other tech be used to better gather and analyze data across value chain emissions? So my question is, if any of you has considered this already, is using this kind of technology to analyze their supply chains and thereby to get a larger picture, which is often the purpose of these tools.
Yes, as a factory, we do use AI and machine learning just to define a model of how the company and the factory works, and to analyze when something goes wrong, the consequences. So basically, we do use AI. We do use AI on energy consumption to have predictive models and to understand why we are not aligned with the models. At the very moment, we are working with startups and, of course, big companies, and we are trying to set up these models. I think it's not ready yet for production, but we are in phase of co-definition because we do see actually the possibility of this. It's very interesting, and we do need to work on this, and we call for subjects and for interest for this. Yes.
Thank you. Maybe one or two speakers comments more if you would like to add any experience or thoughts on this.
In a level, we are using AI and machine learning, especially for business. It means that for part of supply chain, still not, but we are investigating to use them mainly to support us and manage all the data that we are going to collect from suppliers. So we are investigating right in this period how to use all these technologies.
Right. Thank you. Would anyone like to add anything? If not, I will pause to give you the last chance. Good. If not, I would wrap this up, and also just a comment. I also know from the businesses that we are working with at CSR Europe that a lot of them are considering AI or machine learning solutions that make use of blockchain to collect the data in a rather, let us say, a bottom-up approach sometimes, and to accompany this with this sometimes a bit more top-down approach, where you cascade the data requests to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So this can be used complementary, but is of course to be developed further in the future. And I see that there will be a lot of potential that is already being considered by some of our speakers and companies here. So that's great to hear. So with this, I would like to thank all of the speakers for joining the session today and wrap up some of the key points. It's difficult for me just to wrap up 2-3 points. I would like rather maybe name some key words that I took away from the session, and that is, first of all, Scope 1 and 2 emissions will be reduced. Scope 3 emissions will stay the big topic. For the future, data collection is key, supplier engagement as well in particular, but that comes hand in hand with trust, engagement with the suppliers or general supply chain actors, and also to make sure to make the projects graspable for both consumers, employees, investors, and anybody else that you may need to convince of your project that you're driving forward. So, well, it's great to hear all the examples today. Thank you very much. We've gotten quite some comments and questions in the chat, which you can see here. If the participants would like to follow up with the companies directly after the session, you can do so by clicking on here, sponsors. There you can reach, for example, the booth of CSR Europe or Total Energies and Enel, and directly chat with the companies. With this, yes, I would like to thank quite on time our speakers for joining us today, the participants for following the session. Thank you very much for the lively discussions and the contributions today. And again, I learned something new. Some things were reconfirmed, and I hope you enjoyed all to join this session. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon.